In studio, here is your host, Kelvin Cochran.
Bring your tide.
Welcome to Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kelvin Cochran. We're on AM 1170, The Answer in San Diego every Sunday from 4 to 5 p.m. You can also stream the show at am1170theanswer.com. My website is educateforlife.org, and we are examining all kinds of issues that pertain to freedom of religion, pop culture, the biblical view of reality and the biblical worldview. We're looking at all these different issues and trying to figure out what's going on in the world. How do we respond to all kinds of the things that are in the news and in the U.S. and also around the world. So thanks for being here on the show today. If you don't know, there is a pretty serious case happening right now with in Atlanta that is a very important case regarding religious freedom and our First Amendment rights. It's with Fire Chief Kelvin Cochran. He was named Atlanta's fire chief in 2008. In 2009, he was actually asked to become the U.S. Fire Administrator by President Obama, one of the highest honors somebody could receive. And in 2010, Mayor Reed, who was the mayor of Atlanta, asked Kelvin Cochran to come back to Atlanta to resume as Atlanta's fire chief. In 2012, he was named Fire Chief of the Year. In 2014, the city of Atlanta they attained a Class 1 rating for fire safety because of the efforts of Kelvin Cochran, Fire Chief Kelvin Cochran. But strangely enough, he was actually fired from his job not shortly after that, and ended up now is in litigation. He believes that he has been fired from his position because of his religious faith. And this is a serious, if this is really the case, if he's really been fired because of being a Christian, that seems extremely unconstitutional. And yet this is what Kelvin Cochran is dealing with today. And I have on the air with me today a very special guest. His name is Jeremy Tedesco, and he is actually part of the council who is litigating for Kelvin Cochran. And Jeremy, I just wanted to say thanks a lot for being on the show here today with us. Thanks,
Kevin. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, well, I looked a little bit at about your past, and you've got some great credentials, and you're doing some amazing things. I read you joined the Alliance Defending Freedom, which specifically is defending people who are being, facing maybe persecution or discrimination because of their Christian beliefs. You actually argued before the U.S. Supreme Court not too long ago in a case, Reed versus the town of Gilbert. And so you're seeing all kinds of things popping up all over the place where people are facing, whether that's being fired, losing their businesses, facing fines or penalties because of their Christian beliefs. And I'm just wanted to know, when did you start getting involved, or when did this start becoming a concern of yours, these issues like religious freedom? And what's your background that brought you into, now dealing with Kelvin Cochran's case here?
Yeah, for me, it started all the way back in high school. I was very pro-life in high school, and once I found those convictions and started expressing them at school, I found that a lot of people didn't like my point of view on that. I took a lot of heat and frankly lost a lot of people that I thought were friends over our disagreement on that issue.
Now, are you
kind of muddled through on how to talk about it anyways. I wasn't too keen on and sure of myself. I just knew what I believed.
Now, what part of the country did you grow up in?
I was in Buffalo, New York.
Okay. And then
down south of there.
And when you said this started to become an issue for you, is that specifically because of your Christian faith, or what was happening there?
Yeah, undoubtedly, it was my Christian faith. I've been raised in the church, and gone to a lot of different camps and different training things over my teenage years, and just came to the conviction that abortion was wrong and evil and needed to be stopped. So anyways, that was the thing that kind of propelled me into it. And then when I got to college, I wound up in essentially the one man standing against kind of the onslaught of the LGBT agenda on my campus at the time.
And where was that? Where was your undergraduate in?
It was at Diminishes College, a small school in Buffalo, New York, private school. Mm-hmm. And I was studying political science and history and was kind of minding my own business when I got in the middle of this huge battle on campus and was kind of the one person that was trying to say, wait, stop, there's another side to this issue. But it was a very challenging time, and God put me in a position where, I needed to either stand for my faith or kind of walk away from it, or at least keep silent about it.
Yeah.
He gave me, he gave me the grace and the courage and the boldness to stand for my faith. And there was a lot of different blowback from it. I mean, it was a kind of scary situation at times, even from my own personal safety. Because of the venom from the other side. Can you give us
an example of that? What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, I got people calling my apartment in college, threatening me. My roommates would take calls from people threatening, to track me down and beat me up. And, it was just, and just generally speaking, the tenor of the campus was anti-Jeremy. I had professors actually draft an op-ed, pen an op-ed, and print it in our campus newspaper, attacking me and saying I was everything that was wrong with the world as far as it concerns LGBT issues, and people like me and our views are the people who are responsible for the violence and various other things and harassment and discrimination that LGBT people experience. So, I mean, it was really unfair, completely untrue, but it was the same thing you see in our culture today.
Yeah.
Where the forces on the other side, the first thing they want to do is paint, the person who's making an objection to their goals as some kind of bigot or somebody who can't be trusted, or, ad hominem attacks and everything else, to try to paint him into a corner and make him seem like somebody who just shouldn't be listened to and should be dismissed.
Yeah, so you were kind of the original God's Not Dead. They kind of modeled that movie off of some of your experiences, huh?
Well, not specifically, but I could certainly relate when I saw the movie.
Yeah.
And the reality is that's true for a lot of our clients. We represent a lot of clients on college campuses who really do experience the God's Not Dead kind of treatment. Sometimes it's even worse. At least he had a chance to air his views in that movie. Most of the time, our clients are just told, shut up.
Yeah. I have a student right now who just messaged me and yesterday and was like, Mr. Conover, because I teach high school students, and she's a graduate, an alumni, and she's in college and is actually doing that very thing. Her professor said, come on up to the front of the class, and I've got lots of questions for you. So, boy, this is happening all over the place.
Yeah, well, it really is. It's coast to coast, and impacts everybody from kids in K through 12 to college to Christians who own businesses to, it's just, there's an ever-present hostility, it seems, and one that's increasing towards religious liberty, especially when Christians are trying to exercise their religious freedoms in our country. And so, it's a time for Christians to kind of understand that, count the costs, realize that there will be a price of some kind if you decide to stand for your faith, but that shouldn't discourage us. It should encourage us, because it's an opportunity to stand for Christ in the gap.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to be talking to Jeremy the rest of this hour, and I hope you'll stay with us. When we come back, we're going to take a closer look at these issues, and there's a lot of emotional passion on both sides, and we don't want to allow the emotion to dominate our thinking. We want to be able to think through this clearly, and we want to find the truth here. What is the best situation we can arrive at in this great country? We've dealt with plenty of issues over the history of this country, and this is another one of those issues we want to navigate through. and come out on the side of freedom, pursuing truth, the ability to have good intellectual discussions on these issues. We don't want to silence anybody. We don't want to be like it is in some countries where you don't have the opportunity at all to voice your opinion. And yet, like Jeremy's saying, on some of the college campuses today, it almost feels like some other country that certainly doesn't represent the freedoms we have come to value here in America. So we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Wake up, America. Diets don't work. 2/3 of us are overweight or obese, and most of us have dutifully dieted our way there. Research indicates the average woman spends 17 years of her life on a diet. Stop dieting. You can lose weight permanently. Thousands already have. Call now for a free DVD. Your body is a divine miracle. Activate the miracle and lose weight permanently with healing foods. Call the Smart Food Club at 888-787-8188.
Add historic American beauty to your home today with genuine Amish furniture. It's built in the USA from solid cherry wood with a bourbon finish. Or choose alternative woods and finishes to accent your home's decor. You'll find it all at Tucker's Valley Furniture. For over 65 years, the Tucker family has served San Diego County. Still family owned. Cash and Carry and Tucker's Valley Furniture. 2 stores, both right across the street at Main and Mollison in El Cajon. Learn more at tuckersvalleyfurniture.com.
Thanks for listening today. This is Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kelvin Cochran. We're on AM 1170, The Answer in San Diego. You can also stream the show at am1170theanswer.com. My website is educateforlife.org, where you can listen to a recording of this show and previous shows. You can listen to this show tomorrow if you'd like, and lots of good information we're going to be covering. And right now we're discussing the issue of religious freedom. And we're seeing a lot of conflict right now. What we're seeing here is people who are maybe, for example, there was a photographer in Arizona who would not photograph a same-sex wedding ceremony, and she ended up being sued by the couple that wanted her to photograph the wedding. As she went to court, she ended up losing the case and was told that regardless of her sincerely held Christian beliefs, she was not allowed to deny service, photography service to a same-sex wedding, and so she was actually fined somewhere around $6,000 or $7,000, and told, if you're going to do business here, this is what you got to do. And this is happening all over the place. There's a case right now happening with a florist who's dealing with the same situation. A baker recently dealt with the same situation. And was fined $135,000. And now our guest today is Jeremy Tedesco, one of the senior legal counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom, and he is currently involved with defending Fire Chief Kelvin Cochran. And but before we get on to Kelvin Cochran, Jeremy, I wanted to ask you about the case that you've been involved with at the Supreme Court level, Reed versus Town of Gilbert. Can you give us a little bit of background on what was happening there and where that currently stands?
Sure. That case is about a small church in Gilbert, Arizona, who wanted to put up signs inviting people to their church services. And the Town of Gilbert's sign code allowed for a lot of different kinds of signs and allowed them to be up for long periods of time, allowed them to be on very large in size and various other things. Basically gave them very favorable treatment. But for the church, they got almost no time to put their signs up. They had to put them on really small little signs. And so it was this very obvious unequal treatment between, for instance, political signs and various other kinds of signs under the code, homeowners association signs, and the church's signs. So we filed a lawsuit back in 2007 challenging the code and in its application to the church. And ultimately the case wound its way through the courts through the last 8 years and wound up before the United States Supreme Court. So we argued the case. My boss, David Cortman, argued the case in January of this year, and we are now awaiting a decision from the Supreme Court. And the case really boils down to a very simple but important First Amendment principle, and that is that the government can't play favorites when it comes to free speech. You can't say political signs get this highly favorable treatment and homeowners association signs get this maybe lesser but still really good treatment. But church signs we're going to give almost no access whatsoever. That's content discrimination. It's favoring certain speech and speakers over others. and it's something the First Amendment says the government shouldn't be able to do.
Now, that seems really basic to me, Jeremy, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are thinking to themselves, I mean, isn't this just common sense? And yet, why are these cases popping up all over the place? Is this just a lack of knowledge regarding those who are advocating these ideas, or is this a outright determined, attack against Christianity and religion, or what is this exactly that's going on here?
Well, I think it's, I don't think it's like attack with malice against Christianity, but I think the case in Gilbert is part of the broader, narrative about I don't necessarily want to say disdain, but the lack of respect, the certain, knockdown off the top pedestal that religious freedom has suffered culturally. And so we see codes like the code in Gilbert, and it really shouldn't surprise us that churches are singled out for less favorable treatment than other sides. Backtrack 40, 50 years ago, that would have seemed unthinkable. Religious speech and churches especially were cherished as great contributors to the community, and religious freedom should be respected and protected for all. But we're not there culturally anymore. We see this in the Indiana situation with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Mike Pence and the legislature there passes a great law to protect religious freedom. And then the forces on the other side come out and say, it's a license to discriminate. They managed to get this really terrible amendment to the law passed within just a few days. It really stripped the religious freedom away from a whole bunch of people that could have benefited from the law. And those things are happening, and we see those kinds of things happening all over the country. And they're typically targeted at religious freedom, at limiting religious freedom. You hear people in Obama administration talking about religious worship, and they talk about religious worship rather than religious freedom or religious liberty intentionally, because they're trying to communicate what they believe, which is that religious freedom is something that you practice in the four corners of your church or within the four walls of your home.
Yeah, it's becoming a private issue
to your public life.
Yeah, a private issue versus a public issue, whereas the First Amendment guarantees religious freedom in the sense that wherever we're at, in public we can be religious. We don't have to restrain our religious views and our Christian viewpoints or to our home or whatever. We don't have to leave our Christianity at the door when we enter the workplace or whatever the case might be.
Correct.
Now,
the First Amendment protects free exercise. That's what it says, free exercise of religion. The exercise of religion is acting on your religion, is conduct, that flows from your religious convictions. And, the society is very happy to accept, many other people's actions and conduct and, the working out of their non-religious beliefs in everyday life. And why should religious people be able to do the same thing? In fact, they can. And the First Amendment specifically says they can. Yeah.
Otherwise, we're no better off than a country, one of the Middle Eastern countries, like maybe Turkey or somewhere, where you're told, yes, you're fine to be a Christian, just don't talk about it in public. Don't talk about Jesus anywhere. And it seems like we're moving in a direction where we're living under a particular worldview, which is a secularist worldview or kind of an agnostic worldview that says the public religion we're going to embrace here in America is, quote, no religion, which is really kind of a secularist religion, and everybody else has just got to keep quiet and stay indoors. Is that kind of a general attitude?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that sums it up, and I think that's why we see a lot of these things happening in an increasing, basis. And so we're going to continue to have these battles in, my law firm, Alliance Defending Freedom. That's what we exist to protect and proactively, defend religious freedom.
Yeah. And what's your website, Jeremy?
Yeah, it's alliancedefendingfreedom.org. It's just the name of our organization, Alliance Defending Freedom plus .org at the end.
And if any of our listeners want to get involved in supporting what you're doing, because you're literally litigating cases all over the country, and I've even seen some news reports that you're actually getting involved in other countries now too.
Absolutely, yeah. They can learn a whole ton about what we do from our website, learn how to engage with us, how to give financially to our work. And you're right, we have an international division now that works overseas in a lot of different countries, and that, of course, is a critical battle as well.
Yeah.
Because we see a lot of legal principles. Unfortunately, we see a lot of legal principles from overseas being imported into our, law. Judges citing opinions from other countries, which they shouldn't be doing because we have our own separate constitution. But because of that and other reasons, we want to be active in the battle across the world, not just in our country.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my guest today, if you're just tuning in, is Jeremy Tedesco, who is a senior legal counsel with the Alliance Defending Freedom, argued before the U.S. Supreme Court, is doing all kinds of good things to uphold the freedom of people who are religious and all over our country to have that freedom not to be persecuted or discriminated against because they are religious. And when we come back, we're going to start discussing Kelvin Cochran, very highly decorated fire chief in Atlanta who was specifically fired by the mayor because he is a Christian and because he holds particular Christian beliefs. Not because of anything he did wrong, but simply because of what he believes and how he thinks. And so stay with us. We'll be right back, and you'll find out more ways to get involved and make a difference in this wonderful place we call the USA.
Wake up, America. 2/3 of us are overweight or obese, and it's not your fault. And the guilt, frustration, and pain. Stop dieting, starving, and depriving yourself. Free yourself from the bondage of feeling trapped in your body. Forgive yourself. Achieve permanent weight loss with healing foods. You can love food again. You can lose weight permanently. Thousands already have. Call now for a free DVD. Your body is a divine miracle. Learn how to activate the miracle. Call the Smart Food Club at 888-787-8188.
Do you have one-button espresso machines in your home or business? They make delicious coffee drinks, but they're not maintenance-free. Express Fix Coffee is San Diego's source for coffee and espresso machine repair, sales, and service. Call Dave Martin at Express Fix Coffee for new and used espresso machines, repairs, parts, and accessories. They'll save you time and money. Call Express Fix Coffee at 619-867-3853. Learn more at expressfixcoffee.com.
Thanks for tuning in to Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kevin Conover. We are on AM 1170, The Answer in San Diego, every Sunday, 4 to 5 p.m. Love to have you become a regular listener and tune in with us. You can also stream the show at am1170theanswer.com. My website is educateforlife.org, where you can listen to a recording of this show or past shows. We're also on iTunes. We podcast all the shows, so feel free to look up previous shows. There's all kinds of fantastic guests that we have on the shows. And our guest today is Jeremy Tedesco with the Alliance Defending Freedom, Senior Legal Counsel. And currently, he's involved with a fire chief in Atlanta who has been let go because of his Christian faith. And specifically, he wrote a book, a devotion, a men's devotion, and it ended up getting into the hands of some people who weren't friendly to Christianity. And ultimately, the mayor, after begging him to come and be the fire chief of Atlanta, ultimately fired him. And so currently, Jeremy and the rest of his firm and the Alliance Defending Freedom are helping Kelvin deal with this in the courts. And so can you give us some more details and background on this case, what exactly happened here, Jeremy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of the thing I think is what you mentioned is important to know about Kelvin Cochran is his background. He grew up at the absolute depths of poverty in Shreveport, Louisiana, without a dad for a good deal of his young life. At 5 years old, he saw firefighters put out a fire in his next door neighbor's house, and at that point, his dream to become a firefighter became alive in his heart, and so he pursued that dream. With God's grace, he achieved the highest possible position in the fire service in the United States. When you mentioned they became the U.S. Fire Administrator when President Obama nominated and the Senate confirmed him to that position in 2009. Before then, he had been a fire chief in Shreveport, then the fire chief in Atlanta. Then he went to the federal government. Then he came back to Atlanta, like you said, because the mayor begged him to come back. He was so essential to their effective service there. In 2012, he was He won the Fire Chief of the Year award, which is given by Fire Chief Magazine and the International Association of Firefighters. And so he is one of the most credentialed, probably the most credentialed firefighter of our day. But he wasn't good enough for Atlanta in the end.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Because of his Christian beliefs. And he wrote a book. He was, in his church life, he was active in men's ministry, and he was inspired through his own studies and the Spirit kind of leading him to do some word studies on various aspects of the Scripture, and it eventually turned into a book. He wrote the book on his own time. He self-published it, and he had actually given a copy to the mayor in January of 2014. He had given a copy to a few other people and friends in the fire service in Atlanta. No problem whatsoever. Fast forward 11 months, somebody gets their hands on the book, doesn't like what Chief Cochran has to say about sexual morality and marriage. He expressed his Christian-based views that sexual acts outside of marriage between a man and a woman are immoral and that men should flee from those. Mm-hmm. Very consistent with Scripture.
Yeah.
And a complaint was made to a particular member of the Atlanta City Council, who's an openly gay gentleman, and that gentleman apparently, put off the alarms, and within just a few days after that occurred, the chief was suspended without pay for 30 days, and then ultimately fired. During the suspension, it's good to know that the city investigated the chief, because their theory was, well, somebody who believes these things certainly has discriminated against people, especially LGBT firefighters.
Yeah.
And they did that investigation, and they found absolutely no evidence that he had mistreated or discriminated against anyone, including lesbian or gay firefighters, but they still fired him. And that goes to show you that the objection here was to what he said and what he believes. The mayor was very clear about this when he suspended him. He came out in the media and said, I found the views expressed in his book, to be, I heavily disapprove of those views, and I disagree with them strongly. And so he was obviously, targeted the chief because of what he believed. And the chief was ultimately fired because of that.
Now, this is amazing to me. And again, I think for a lot of our listeners too, it seems almost unbelievable. It's like a story you would read in the history books, or from another country or something, and yet here we are in our country that's supposed to be free. We have freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of the press, freedom of association, all these incredible freedoms, and yet here's a guy who has an impeccable record, literally investigated and found nothing at all giving any kind of discrimination, and yet they still fire him. And I look at this and I'm just thinking to myself, so here they are. They're about to make this decision that they're going to fire him, and they're going, okay, we're going to fire him because of what he thinks. What grounds do they have to actually think that they can win the court case? It just seems like a totally losing battle that they're trying to fight here.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think you're right. I think one thing that people should think about, and I think it's sobering, is if somebody like Chief Cochran is not safe, if he can get fired for his beliefs, then really no one's safe. Because, and that's just not for Christians who hold the same beliefs he does. Because the government, the prevailing opinion in society ebbs and flows. Right now, maybe we're, on the LGBT bandwagon, but it could be some other set of beliefs 10 years from now or 5 years from now even. And and so do we really want as a society, regardless of what the chief believes, do we really want the government to be able to fire you because of what you believe, because you put it down on paper and self-publish it on your own time? I mean, that's something we certainly should not want in our country. So I agree with you. Obviously, we filed the case. I think this is a clear violation of his First Amendment rights to free speech and free exercise of religion, amongst some other rights as well. The city essentially says, well, he violated our rules, and he was, lacked judgment and was a poor leader, which is hard to really believe when the mayor had to go beg him to come back to Atlanta, the chief operated the fire department in Atlanta at the highest possible levels. He had great accolades.
Yeah, I mean, he was the U.S. fire administrator. How are you going to tell him he didn't do a good job or lacked judgment? I mean, Obama selected him as the fire administrator.
Yeah, I know. And their main argument essentially is we have this rule that says if you are employed outside of the fire department, you have to get approval before you can accept that employment. Well, this was, first of all, the rule doesn't even apply to him because he self-wrote and self-published a book.
Yeah.
It's not an employment issue. But, on top of that, there's First Amendment implications. If the city is saying, and they have essentially come out and said, if you write something and you put it out in the public domain and you potentially get money from it, you got to get approval from us beforehand. Well, you can't do that. That's called a prior restraint. The government, you can't be put in a position of having to ask the government if you can engage in your First Amendment rights.
Yeah.
And so that kind of prior approval process isn't going to work for something like this anyway. So they don't have a policy that applies to him in the way they say, but even if they did, it would violate his rights and the rights of every other employee in the city as well.
Absolutely.
If they actually did have that kind of a policy.
Well,
so, I think the thing is, we got to see how the case plays out. We just recently filed it, and it's just underway. And we got a long way to go, but certainly would appreciate people's prayers as we litigate this case. I think it is of critical importance.
Absolutely. Well, I'm with Jeremy Tedesco, AllianceDefendingFreedom.org for more information. We'll be right back.
Wake up, America. Diets don't work. 2/3 of us are overweight or obese, and most of us have dutifully dieted our way there. Research indicates the average woman spends 17 years of her life on a diet. Stop dieting. You can lose weight permanently. Thousands already have. Call now for a free DVD. Your body is a divine miracle. Activate the miracle and lose weight permanently with healing foods. Call the Smart Food Club at 888-787-8188.
Take your first steps toward pain-free feet. With just one call, Dr. Roy Phillips will take time with you whether you need top-quality orthotics, relief from ingrown or infected nails, fasciitis, bursitis, or surgical solutions. If you've been told that you need surgery, call Dr. Roy Phillips, 858-272-1091. Learn more online at drphillipspodiatrist.com, 858-272-1091.
Welcome to Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kelvin Cochran. We're on AM 1170, The Answer in San Diego. You can also stream the show at am1170theanswer.com. And if you'd like to listen to a recording of this show tomorrow or anytime at all, my website is educateforlife.org. Also on my website, there's all kinds of classes you can take that pertain to issues like this. I have a class called Blessed is the Nation Whose God is the Lord. It's an apologetic defense. It's an argument that the nation that upholds the biblical worldview will actually reap benefits from that upholding that particular worldview. Every person and every country has a philosophical foundation, and that philosophical foundation affects the laws that are put out in that particular country. And we're no different than that. And my argument, and the argument of many of those people who hold the views I do, is that our country has reaped tremendous blessings because it has held up the biblical worldview and the Judeo-Christian worldview. So my guest today is Jeremy Tedesco, and we are discussing religious freedom, and what's happening is we're seeing Christians fired from their jobs for holding Christian perspectives. Now, not doing anything wrong necessarily, but just holding a Christian perspective, trying to abide by their conscience. And Jeremy, you were talking to me off the air about some ministers that were potentially threatened with fines and imprisonment simply because they would not conduct a same-sex wedding ceremony, like a pastor wouldn't do that. Can you share with our audience what you were telling me?
Sure, yeah, that happened in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and the case is still ongoing. And they weren't potentially threatened; they were threatened. The city, essentially, what happened was the federal district court in Idaho struck down Idaho's marriage laws and said that Idaho had to recognize same-sex marriages back in May of 2014. As soon as that happened, the state appealed, and the decision was stayed pending the appeal. But the city came out and started saying publicly that any wedding chapels and people who perform wedding-related services in the city are going to have to provide those services to same-sex marriage and same-sex wedding ceremonies should same-sex marriage be legalized. And they specifically talked about our client, the Hitching Post, which is run by the Reverends Don and Lynn Knapp, as an example. Well, our clients heard that in the news, called the city a couple times and confirmed with them, are you saying that we could be in violation of a local law that prohibits sexual orientation discrimination if we decline to do a same-sex wedding ceremony, even though we're ministers? And the city said yes, and our client said, and we could be subject to all the penalties, including jail time and criminal fines. The city said yes. So our clients were terrified. My client, Don Knapp, he couldn't sleep at night for weeks at a time. So anyways, we ended up, once marriage became legalized in Idaho, the Ninth Circuit said same-sex marriage has to be legal in Idaho. Our clients received a request at their wedding facility for a same-sex ceremony. They declined that request, which put them in immediate risk of being prosecuted under the law. And we filed a lawsuit same day and a request for a temporary restraining order prohibiting the city from enforcing the law against our clients. And the city woke up pretty quick after this hue and a cry came out from the public. And they came out several days after the lawsuit and said, we're not going to prosecute these people. But the problem is their ordinance still is completely unclear as to who it applies to.
Yeah.
And we are asking the city and have been asking them to make it clear that even these for-profit businesses, because our clients in that case run a for-profit business, for-profit businesses that are running according to the religious beliefs of their owner are exempt from these kind of laws. And they've been unwilling to do that. So we're continuing to litigate the case.
Okay. Now, I know a lot of people have this question. The question is, okay, so you've got a baker and he bakes cakes and he doesn't want to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding ceremony. This is not theoretical. As you know, your ADF was involved in this. And they say, we don't want to bake this cake for the same-sex couple. So some people are saying, well, that's not really right, because even though you disagree with their views, the reality is that they deserve to be served too. If they go to a burger joint, it's not like you can say, hey, we don't agree with same-sex marriage ceremonies, therefore we're not going to participate in giving you burgers, or something like this. So for a lot of people, they're thinking, what's the big deal? Bake the cake. Just because you don't agree with their viewpoints doesn't mean you can't bake a cake for them. How would you respond to them? And constitutionally, what do we do here?
Yeah, I mean, there's several different responses. First of all, it's not sexual orientation discrimination to do what our clients in those circumstances are doing. So the law says no sexual orientation discrimination. Well, that means you can't bar, certain people from being able to conduct business with you. So our clients in those cases aren't saying, I won't serve homosexuals. In fact, in a lot of these cases, like our florist case in Washington, the florist served the very person that they told, I can't do your same-sex wedding ceremony. I can't do the flowers for those. But she had served that same client for the past 9 years, creating all these different kind of floral designs and creations for him. And so she clearly serves homosexual clients, even the very same homosexual client who she ultimately declined to do a same-sex ceremony for. So, they're not objecting to doing the service on the basis of the person's sexual orientation. They're objecting to the event and being put in a position of having to use their God-given talents and skills in artistry to celebrate something that violates their religious beliefs. And that's an important distinction. But there's also important First Amendment protections that protect artists in these kind of professions. They protect speech. They protect the free exercise of religion. And so what's really going on in these situations is those people are trying to use the law to compel Christians to use their artistic talents, their time, their energy, to create expressions celebrating same-sex unions that they don't want to create. And it's the same with the photographers. It's the same with print shop owners. I mean, they all have this First Amendment right to be free from compelled speech, free from being compelled to express something that violates their convictions. That's a right, by the way, that everyone enjoys. So you put yourself in the position of a gay photographer who doesn't want to do the promotional photography at a Westboro Baptist Church rally. that happens to be occurring in their state. The Westboro Baptist Church calls up the gay photographer and says, we want you there to, film our, kind of nasty rally with speech that's going to be deeply offensive to you. That gay photographer has every right, and I would defend their right vehemently to object and say no. And just like the Westboro Baptist Church can't compel that person to create that message against their will in violation of their beliefs, the same holds true for the Christians that are involved in these kinds of cases right now.
Okay, so that's a very good clarification. So where we're drawing the line here is coercing somebody to violate essentially their conscience in asking them to serve in a capacity that they are not comfortable serving in.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And you have to understand, too, that businesses, they decline to do business all the time. So the other side acts like, once you open a business, you have to serve every single person that comes through the door. That's simply not true. Business owners, and especially people in the creative professions, which all these people are, they commonly have to say no, and do say no to various different things. And for a lot of our clients, in fact, for all of our clients, in these kinds of situations, it's not like their religious beliefs only apply to this one little part of their business. It impacts their entire business, how they run their business. And for instance, like our print shop owner in Kentucky, who was brought to court because he declined to print promotional T-shirts for our gay pride rally. He declined to do plenty of other different kinds of things, whether it was shirts with vulgarity or profanity, or shirts that had scantily clad women or indecent things. So this is something he reserves the right to object to participating in a lot of different kinds of things and filling a lot of different kinds of orders on the basis of his religious beliefs. And that's an important thing to understand. It's not like this is a one-trick pony where I only object to
same-sex
marriage related.
Yeah.
It's across the board, and I reserve the right because I run my business according to my religious belief.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I said before our last short break, I said that we were on our last segment, and I was wrong. We have one more to go, so you're in luck. We get to spend another 10 minutes here with Jeremy Tedesco of the Alliance Defending Freedom, just to pick his brain and get a better grip on these issues that are hugely significant and are going to affect the future of our country and the freedoms that we hold dear. So we will be right back with one more segment.
Wake up, America. 2/3 of us are overweight or obese, and it's not your fault. And the guilt, frustration, and pain. Stop dieting, starving, and depriving yourself. Free yourself from the bondage of feeling trapped in your body. Forgive yourself. Achieve permanent weight loss with healing foods. You can love food again. You can lose weight permanently. Thousands already have. Call now for a free DVD. Your body is a divine miracle. Learn how to activate the miracle. Call the Smart Food Club at 888-787-8188.
Welcome back to Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kelvin Cochran. We're on AM 1170, The Answer in San Diego. We're on our last segment here with Jeremy Tedesco of the Alliance Defending Freedom. His website is alliancedefendingfreedom.org. I encourage you to go check it out, to look into what they're doing. Everybody should become very aware of the efforts that his organization is attempting to handle. The consequences are gigantic, and we're going to see this ongoing culture war happen here, and we really need to get a grip on this information, especially anybody who values their freedom, their religious freedom, their decision to abide by their conscience. I very much encourage you to check out their website, alliancedefendingfreedom.org. My website is educateforlife.org. You can get a recording of this message if you'd like to. Jeremy, I wanted to ask you now, about when did we start going wrong as a country? I mean, it's not like this has been the case for hundreds and hundreds of years that we're dealing with these issues of people can't practice their Christianity or run their businesses how they want to run them. When did things start going wrong? And when did people start taking this phrase separation of church and state and saying, when you become a public employee, like they told Kelvin Cochran, when you become a public employee, you got to leave your religious beliefs at the door. If they're not the same as the city's beliefs, then leave them at the door. Where do we start going wrong here in regards to that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is tied to what you're talking about, the whole concept of separation of church and state, which of course isn't even in our Constitution, which came into the law in 1947 when the Supreme Court decided Everson versus Board of Education in a unanimous decision, which was actually filled with historical inaccuracies. Many historians have shown that now over the years. The Supreme Court basically said, as far as we're concerned, the separation of church and state is what the Establishment Clause means, and that's a high and impregnable wall, and it needs to be protected. And essentially, from that position forward, it's kind of a watershed moment in the law, but I think also culturally, where this idea of the separationist mindset kind of creeped into all aspects of our life. You see it everywhere. It's public schools routinely shut down student clubs or student religious literature distribution in school hallways because of this mistaken belief that it violates the Establishment Clause, this separation idea. You see.
And for those of our audience who don't know, the Establishment Clause is in the First Amendment, where the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. That's the Establishment Clause. And Jeremy, when it says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, it's specifically saying the federal government shall not do that. And in 1947, correct me if I'm wrong, they actually changed Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion to the state shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Is that correct, what I'm saying there?
That is correct. What they did, the Establishment Clause, from the founder's standpoint, the Establishment Clause was in place to ensure that the federal government respected each individual state's approach to religious freedom and religious matters. They just didn't want Congress intermeddling, and the federal government ultimately intermeddling in how the state dealt with those issues. We're just giving the states freedom to do that. Well, then in 1947, not only did they put separation of church and state, as the essential meaning of the Establishment Clause, but they said that prohibition, the Establishment Clause prohibition, now applies to the states as well, which opened up just a huge array of cases that could be taken before the Supreme Court that never could be before. Because now every state, every local school district, every local government's actions could be reviewed by the Supreme Court for compliance with this idea of strict separation between church and state.
So we became, that's essentially when we became kind of almost a secularized nation. It became freedom from religion instead of freedom of religion because of that 1947 case. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that you can certainly draw a line to that point in history. And then, it wasn't an overnight thing, but it was a progression in the law and in our culture to where that became kind of an accepted thing. You see it with the church, with the Johnson Amendment passed in 1954 that said churches can't speak about politics from the pulpit without risking losing their tax-exempt status. Well, that's a perfect example of, separation between church and state. The church shouldn't impact politics and has no right to even say something about it. And if they do, we're going to take punitive action against them as the state. And that's been used as a tool ever since then to silence churches and to remove them from the public debate on these kind of critical, important issues. And then that mentality infecting our culture.
Yeah, and then what happens over time is that even people that would be involved, like pastors that would be involved in political issues, because they're so scared of it, and because this myth has been perpetuated all over the place, it's like one of those bad emails that just keeps getting forwarded. Right. The pastors are thinking that they can't do things that they actually can do.
Right. And at ADF, we have a whole project called Pulpit Freedom. The Pulpit Freedom Project that is dedicated to educating pastors about what they can and can't do, and really aimed at taking down that entire nefarious restriction on the right of pastors to engage on these issues. But you see it across the board. I really think that whole separation mindset is something that our culture essentially has accepted too. I mean, you talk to somebody, and ask them, do you think the business owner should be able to, run their businesses according to their religious beliefs? Well, no. I don't think that has any relevance. If they enter commerce, then they leave their religious beliefs at the door.
Yeah, and that's
There's
crazy.
A lot of people that believe that.
Yeah, and that's driving me crazy. I just seeing this everywhere, and how people just have a complete lack of understanding. And it really seems like they don't see the unintended consequences of that, this idea, and how it's going to impact their own lives. As, like you were saying before, it's going to affect the gay person who decides, I don't want to participate in doing photography for for an event that's anti-homosexual or something like that, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, they should have the right to do that. You want the most obvious hypocrisy of all is these major corporations, Apple and Walmart, and all these big CEOs with all their power and their money. They come out and say, these religious business owners, these small business owners, which is who we're really talking about here. They don't have the right to run their businesses according to their religious belief. But we're going to exercise our First Amendment rights to say that. We're going to come out and advocate till, and threaten the states until they do what we want them to do and take away people's First Amendment rights. Yeah. The right to free exercise of religion and the way they run their business. But they don't have any problem at all exercising their rights in the way they run their business. Yeah, it's just appalling to me to watch all these things occur.
They're asking.
Is we should all be on an even playing field and be able to, exercise our freedoms in, the areas of life that where we're engaged.
Yeah, they're asking for tolerance, but not giving the tolerance is what's happening. They're saying, hey, be tolerant of everybody, but we're not going to be tolerant of you.
Tolerant for those who agree with us.
Yeah, very backwards kind of a thing. It's no logic. But anyway, I just want to thank you very much, Jeremy, for being on the show this evening. I applaud what you're doing, and we'll be praying for you. And I love your ministry and organization, and I talk about it whenever I get a chance. So thank you very much for being on the show tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate the time. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Jeremy's website is alliancedefendingfreedom.org. Go and check it out. You can learn a ton of information. You can stay up to date on cases that they're currently litigating. They put the legal docs right up there on the site. You can actually read them and check them out. And you know what? You use your rights or you lose your rights, and that's really how it is. So for all of you out there who value freedom, I encourage you, get involved. Don't just let this be a show that just goes by the wayside and you move on with life. Get involved and make a difference. God bless you. Have a fantastic evening. I'll hopefully be with you next week, 4 to 5 p.m. every Sunday. educateforlife.org. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Educate for Life with Kevin Conover, a regular feature on AM 1170, The Answer.